Hello, BookTube. I got a universal positive response from people who aren't lurkers about that recent paperback roundup that I did of new or immediately forthcoming paperback releases that you're going to see in your bookstore. Uh, it's sort of a way to show them to you, bring maybe some of them to your attention, maybe recommend some of them. So I thought I would just regularly do that. Not only because, I love getting new paperbacks, and I hardly ever get a chance to talk about them. And in a crowded review schedule, I don't ever get to review them. But also because, like I mentioned last time, I think that the paperback table is where a lot of people do their serious book shopping. I mean, if you've got, let's say, $35 to spend, that's going to be two books and maybe a cookie or a croissant or something at the paperback table, and it's barely going to be one book with tax at the hardcover table. So I think a lot of people do that. I certainly did. So I have a small handful of paperbacks that are new here that I want to show you, coming out either in the next week or early in December, and maybe talk about them just a bit. The first one is this thing which I read but never reviewed, and it's one of those nonfiction works where I read it, I was impressed by it, and then it got buried in a bunch of other stuff, and I didn't realize until months later that it was still working on me, that I was still thinking about it. This is by Richard McGregor, and it is Asia's Awakening, which is now coming out in paperback. The subtitle is China, Japan, and the Fate of the U.S. Power in the Pacific Century. And that is the contention of this book. The underlying contention is that the 21st century will belong to the Pacific. A fascinating thing that I thought was overreaching when I started, but the author's brilliant. And he doesn't go out on a limb anywhere in this book. It's heavily girded in research. I'm glad that the paperback is out now, because I really want to reread this. It got loaded with praise from all quarters of creation when it came out. I felt sorry that I didn't review it. I won't be reviewing it now, but I will. I very much want to reread it and make sure that I get it all. And then the next one is the latest. I think this comes out in December. This is the latest in a series that we've already seen, even here on these paperback roundups. These are the new Penguin translations of the Maigret novels by Georges Simenon. This one is Maigret's Secret, which, if I remember correctly, is mostly told in flashback. A dinner party where Maigret regales his guests with a case that has always haunted him, and a man who was murdered, who was executed for a crime that Maigret is not 100% sure he committed. And of course, because Simenon knows exactly what he's doing, even when he's dashing these things off at white heat, he knows exactly what he's doing. And because of that, of course, there's a crime that's interconnected that's in the present day. It's not just a novel told in flashback, although that can work, and this author could certainly do that. But if I remember correctly, he doesn't just do that. But this is the latest one in that series. Then we have what I admit is a pretty 2-volume set. These are the poems of T.S. Eliot, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Two big new paperbacks, exhaustively edited and annotated by Christopher Ricks, who's fantastic. So that you get, you get tons of annotation in addition to the poems themselves. And the first volume has just a gigantic collection of the poetry, and the second volume is practical cats and a whole bunch of lesser verse, including stuff that Eliot just dashed off for friends. And the reason why I sound so tentative is because I've never really liked this poet, and I keep thinking that maybe that is wrong. I keep thinking that maybe I should try harder or try again to like this poet. And I'm going to take these 2 volumes as the way to do that. They're gorgeous. I think they come out next week, and they're everything. And they're introduced and annotated by a writer I really like. So I figure if this can't do it, then nothing can. And I don't like to think that nothing can. So I'll be reading a lot of Eliot. And then the last one that I want to show you for now, for this paperback roundup, but I'll do one of these every week. The last one that I want to show you for now is a Megillah. It's an enormous thing. It's a paperback, and yet it's $25. So it teeters on the edge of the affordability thing that I was talking about just a minute ago. I read it in advance copy when it came out. It's 1,100 pages long, and I read it again in finished copy, and then I wrote a review. And I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read it again in paperback. This is by Stephen Kotkin, and it is Stalin, Waiting for Hitler. 1929 to 1941. Look at the size of that thing. Just enormous. It has a blurb from my review on the first page, and it's a mighty impressive company that I'm in. I'm the very last blurb on the list, but still, I'm immensely flattered. And this is now in a new, attractive Penguin paperback. I don't have the hardcover anymore, but I'm glad to have this, and I will reread it. I was cautious throughout, because when you deal with a really long biography like this, even of a monster, Stalin was the greatest monster, in my opinion, the greatest monster in human history. Certainly the greatest monster in the 20th century, easily. And it usually sometimes happens that when a biographer slogs through papers and journals and all previous biographies and letters for years, 10 years, to write a 1,200-page biography of someone, it often happens that Stockholm Syndrome will set in. And they start making excuses. They start justifying, first in their minds and then on the page, why they're spending so much time with this creature. And I'm wary of that, because there was nothing good about Stalin. And if you don't write a biography that says that, you are misserving your readers and posterity. But that doesn't really happen. This is pretty much, it's got a lot of shadings and a lot of detail and a lot of intelligence behind it, but it is pretty much a portrait of a monster. So I'm going to read it again, just to be done with it. I told myself when I wrote my review that I would reread the paperback if I ever got it. I did, so I will. Then I'll be done with Stalin. Of course, I won't be, because there's a volume after this, so I'm not done with them anyway. But that is a paperback roundup for today. A nice variety for you, just to show you some of the stuff that will be out in the new release section at your bookstores. So you have the very pretty Poems of T.S. Eliot edition. Then you have Cock and Stalin. This is volume 2, believe it or not. Volume 1 was just pure psychopathy. This is psychopathy on the world stage. So there's a lot of stuff here about Roosevelt and Churchill and Hitler. And then Asia's Reckoning. Very good present-day study. Very good cutting-edge history is what you could call it, because it's as much about the present as it is about the immediate past. And that's tough to do. Although some of our founding historians back in the classical days of Greece and Rome were actually doing that. So it has a long pedigree. And as a palate cleanser, because, boy, I think I'm going to need one. There's the latest Maigret in paperback. So that is a paperback roundup for you. And I'll be back. I'll be back with more. Thank you, BookTube.